Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome back to Liberty Mail. I'm Katie Kenline.
And I'm Grace Riley.
And we are live in the underground studio at Grove City College for the Institute for Faith and Freedom. And today in this episode, we're going to recap some election results from last week and then talk a little bit about China-U.S. relations as President Xi and President Biden are about to meet in San Francisco this week in the United States.
Yeah, so that's big coming up. We'll start off with election results before we get into everything relating to China. And there are so many facets of that we won't have time to go into, but we're going to break down some of what's been going on over the past few years and just why those relations are so crucial, obviously, as you all know. But to start with the election results, so I think let's start with Ohio, because we did an episode covering Ohio's issue 1, which lost. And let's just start by talking about that. And what are your thoughts, Katie, on what you expected to happen and what actually ended up happening?
Yeah, so, when we talked about this, we did say, we do expect that this is going, that issue 1 is going to pass. And so, to me, that's a loss. But we did see it passed with 56% of the vote and 44% cast in opposition. It was very interesting to see a huge majority, almost 70% of all the early voting that happened was all in favor of issue 1. So you can see there was tons of money poured into this. There's been a lot of articles about how much George Soros money was spent on this campaign in Ohio. I'm disappointed. It's sad. I think the worst thing was to see, even Associated Press, so, this is not even really super biased, saying a proposal to, quote, enshrine abortion rights in Ohio's Constitution. We did a whole episode about this, but that word again that we just kept on seeing and people celebrating, it really disappointed me and it feels bad.
Yeah. And there were losses across the board where a lot of talk has been happening about the RNC, about how effective they are, if they need new leadership, about their fundraising methods, since Republicans have been outspent in a lot of these big winnable elections. So that's really important and crucial to look at. And also we wanted to talk about Virginia and Kentucky results.
Also elections that we had thought were winnable and that people surely didn't see all of this coming. So in Virginia, where they have Governor Youngkin, strong Republican leadership there, the Democrats retained their Senate majority, and they flipped the House of Delegates back from a Republican majority to a Democrat majority. So we were not expecting to see that, especially after the state elected Governor Youngkin. And then in Kentucky, a state that Trump carried by more than 25 points in 2020. Their Democrat governor, Andy Beshear, so he was already elected, but he won his second term. He completely blew out his opponent, again in a state that Trump carried by 25 points. So I think we had thought things were maybe trending one way where they're tired of the Biden administration, they're tired of the left's agenda. But then we see both in Virginia and Kentucky, people that are willing to continue to vote for the same leadership.
Yeah, and I think another interesting thing that I've heard float around, so some people have been saying that Republicans should maybe back off of the abortion issue because it's not winning elections. I have a lot of thoughts on that and why that is the wrong approach, and I'd love to hear what you think. I think absolutely that's the wrong approach because Republicans, Democrats, whatever, no one should be supporting or not supporting abortion just for political reasons. The reason to stand for life is because it's the right thing to do, not because it's winnable. So I think that there can be changes in marketing in the way that things are happening to hopefully have more successes in the future as far as elections go. But I don't think that there's any room to talk about let's back off of this for political reasons.
Yeah,
or I don't think that's right.
Fault. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of other issues in play here, and there's also a lot of pro-life wins that have happened over the past year, over the past two years. So there have been wins, even though these are some losses.
Yeah, well, and we look at Virginia, for example. Governor Youngkin was supporting candidates that would hopefully maintain the House of Delegates and the Senate. And he was supporting candidates and who were openly in support of a 15-week abortion limit. And I think that even that could be communicated better to where it's being used as, oh, he shouldn't have said anything about that. He shouldn't have brought that into the campaign. But if we really start thinking about a 15-week abortion limit, it's absolutely reasonable when it comes to like abortions happening after that start to become multi-day procedures, start to become more painful, more traumatic, more intense. And there is a way to communicate that he is standing for what a majority of his people in Virginia would support. So there's a way to even that affected how if things aren't explained or if his stance is that affected. There's a lot of articles about how his support of a 15-week abortion limit really affected the Virginia elections. It's interesting.
Yeah, so let's move into China now
Yeah.
and talking about that. I know that you had a point that you wanted to bring up about Governor Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas. So we'll begin with that and then move into what is going on. So what we're going to talk about now is going to have to do with the farmland, which you may know or may heard about this issue before, but this has been over the past few years where Chinese nationals are buying up United States farmland. And why is this important, you ask? Well, there's been an increase. So as of this summer, there's been an increase of 456% since 2011 of 384,000 acres being purchased in 2021 of our farmland. So that's a huge increase since then. So over the past few years, there's been extreme increases of China buying up United States land. And why would they be doing that? Why would they care about buying up farmland? Well, there's a lot of reasons, part of which has to do with seed and has to do with intellectual property that is American, which may not sound initially like a big deal, but it really is.
Yeah, and so what we have seen is Governor Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas. So she ordered a subsidiary of a Chinese-owned company to divest itself to that it needed to sell off agricultural land that's in the state and pay fines because the company that owns this is the Chinese National Chemical Company that is a Chinese state-owned company. So it's not just Chinese nationals buying land in the United States. It's literally like people working for the Chinese government. And so I think I was happy to see the governor stand strong for that because it's very stark contrast between what we've seen with Governor Newsom in California. And there's a lot of fire and heat on Twitter right now about him having apparently cleared the streets off in San Francisco of their. We know that there's a large homeless crisis there that he's not able to fix. But with President Xi Jinping coming there, he has completely cleared the streets and made everything look perfect. And this starts to open up this question of, are we, like Governor Newsom, appeasing China and trying to please them and trying to make maybe like we're afraid of them, or like Governor Sanders, are we standing up and we're also a strong nation that shouldn't back down or cower to them? We've seen a lot of this back and forth.
Well, on the side of Governor Sanders, there has been a lot of different legislation introduced to try to stop the buying up of farmland. So there was legislation introduced to Congress this past summer, led by Rep. Mike Gallagher, and also part of that and part of the reason for that legislation being introduced that was bipartisan to attempt to prevent more farmland from being bought up. So this goes alongside what Sarah Huckabee Sanders is doing. Part of the reason for that is that Chinese theft of intellectual property in the United States has cost the U.S. economy an estimated $225 to $600 billion every single year. So it's a really, really big deal. And as far as national security, national sovereignty goes, it's a big deal. And just to jump into, so you mentioned Governor Newsom and what's happening this week as we prepare for President Xi visiting and meeting with President Biden. Now, what happened was, so as Katie kind of mentioned, this has been going viral a bit. If you haven't heard or seen, what happened was Governor Newsom has launched a cleanup effort in downtown San Francisco. Now, people, of course, asked him, the timing of this is kind of curious. So San Francisco has been a disaster for people to live in, and it's a complete disaster. It's now known to be a disaster. Businesses leaving, homelessness rising. Really, really crazy, really horrible place to be, right? So now all of the sudden, there's this cleanup effort ahead of this visit. So Governor Newsom was asked about this and about the curious timing of, well, why now? Why are you cleaning up now? And he says, and I'll quote him, I know folks say, oh, they're just cleaning up this place because all these fancy leaders are coming into town. That's true because it's true. So, end quote. So Governor Newsom admits that he's cleaning up for China's president to come visit, right? So he's cleaning up for China. And people had a lot to say about this because the American people have been suffering here. And there was no cleanup for the American people. There's no action. But when the president of China comes, now we're going to change everything for the better. So just to read one statement. So this is from the Public Square CEO, Michael Safer, and he said, I'm a CEO who moved my business from California to Florida. It turns out that California's politicians will clean up their streets when the dictator of China comes to town, but they won't do it to keep business owners like myself from leaving their state. So that's something that people have really latched onto, that he's going to clean everything up for China, but not for the American people who are suffering living there. Businesses who have left, closed up. The numbers are pretty crazy. So that just happened. And he also had just visited China, which was really interesting why California's governor needed to go visit President Xi in China.
Yeah. And we also saw out of this a funny video.
Some awkward moments during Governor Newsom's China trip over the weekend. He was showing off his basketball moves with a group of students when he lost his footing, took down a child as he fell onto the court. It happened during a stop in Beijing.
You can look it up if you just search up Governor Newsom basketball in China. But there is a video of him like absolutely taking out this child he's playing basketball with. Like he literally falls on top of this kid.
That was the internet highlight of his visit to China. He was like decking this kid.
He was
during
like
a
showing
basketball
off.
game.
It just is like, this is the state of, that's the state of like trying to appease China. Like he's literally falling on the ground into this child. Like I just don't even know what else to say. But it is interesting. We've seen a trend throughout the last couple of years, the Biden administration, of really almost the Biden administration making us more reliant on China. And again, like we see this control that China has where we'll clean up for them and we'll try to look great for them.
And not only China, other countries who are not our friends.
Yeah. A quote that I read today was that the founding father did not design the American democratic system to compete with communist countries. Our system's strength lies within its intent to limit, or their system, strength lies within the intent to limit the power and like be super controlling of their people. Our system's strength is in freedom of the people. So I think that that's the thing too, is like we have to recognize we don't have to play a game with them. We don't have to appease China. We've seen like the Biden administration's green agenda has almost turned us into being more reliant on China because the Biden administration right now is stopping American energy production. Instead, we'll turn to China to get the certain materials or minerals that were needed. And also we know like the extreme human rights abuses that happen when we get these alternative energy methods from China. We know that there's tragic child labor, that there's that they're using Muslims in China as labor source. Like there's nothing good about trying to become more reliant on China. instead
Yeah.
of American energy
Well,
independence.
and that, of course, is both here on the ground as far as the farmland goes, which is, again, being bought up near military bases in
Yep.
part. It's also hurting our food security, buying up that land that we need. And again, the intellectual property theft is a really big deal. So here on the ground, that's important, as well as our relations on a national stage. And America should be coming from a place of strength. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who are worried about that and don't see that place of strength. And with everything going on, and the back and forth, I think I would caution the Biden administration to be careful and not, in a sense, be naive and fall for
Yep.
basically what China would maybe prefer the United States align with. And this is funny enough. So when I'm not here at IFF, I contribute to the American Spectator part-time, and one of the articles that went up today is just worth checking out, so I'll give it a little plug. It was actually about China, about President Xi's visit that will be coming this week, and at the time that you're hearing this, it'll probably be happening, actually. But they wrote an article which was about, it's titled, actually, if you want to look it up, Why Has the CCP Banned Demonizing America? And it kind of goes into that, and it kind of goes into the fact of, well, President Biden should be careful because China is an adversary. It's not our friend, does not have our best interest at heart, and it should be taken as a serious threat. And if the United States continues to not take China seriously and continues to kind of go back and forth and be wobbly on China, then we're going to have serious problems.
Yeah, well, and we know that we've continued to, for example, when the spy balloon is over Montana out in my part of the country out west, it was a
how
joke.
can we forget that?
It was a joke. It was a meme. It was like, oh, we aren't really taking this seriously. I think we almost don't even want to believe when there are there are multiple public press releases, if you literally look on the FBI website, about U.S. military personnel leaking information to the CCP. This is happening every couple weeks. Someone's getting arrested within the military, in the U.S. military, for leaking sensitive material to the CCP. We don't want to believe that this is true. We see the things about, maybe there's a CCP police base in the United States, and we think this is the most conspiracy thing ever. This can't be true. But it's literally on the Department of Justice website. It's actually our government is investigating these things that maybe we don't hear about, or maybe we don't want to realize China actually is a threat, but the country is.
And I think a lot of people do realize it. I think the problem is that our leaders are not handling things in the way that people would prefer. And at the same time, look at all the other threats that we have too. So in general, strength really needs to be a priority. So hopefully it is.
Yeah, well, and this week, too, there are many what we would call wrongfully detained Americans being held in China. And I know Fox continues to run stories of families who are saying this week when President Biden's going to smile and shake hands with President Xi, and it's going to be this how can we work together collaboration thing, we have to remember that they have many of our United States citizens there that are being held for all kinds of charges that their family will claim these are fabricated and they're held for no reason. And so people just pleading with the Biden administration, you have to take the threat of the Chinese government seriously and the Chinese Communist Party, because they have had our family members there for 10 years. Or we have to remember that people's real lives are being affected by this. But we'll just have they'll have a conference in San Francisco, and who knows what they'll talk about.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens this week. And as you're listening to this, there will obviously be new developments in what happens in this meeting. And I think just to end my big, somewhat, it's really not a funny issue at all. It's very serious. But the funny, ironic takeaway is the story coming out of San Francisco of Gavin Newsom cleaning up for President Xi to come, but letting Americans live the way that they have under his leadership, and which has been a complete disaster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Buying farmland, taking away American land, and it continues to go downhill. Taking away, we know the country of China pollutes the world more than any other country. And the United States, the Green Advocates here, they're not going to say anything when the president's here. It's interesting.
Yeah, we will see what happens. But thank you for listening to this episode. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
For more information on the Institute for Faith and Freedom, visit faithandfreedom.com.